everyone. Be most welcome to this webinar of Bússola Tech. As you might know, my name is Luís Kimaid from Bússola Tech, and today I have the honor to be the host of such a qualified panel. Today we are going to discuss artificial intelligence applied to the legislative process. This is a theme that is particular of interest to me, but also a theme that creates a lot of uncertainty and expectations. Some people believe we are going to Shangri-La, we are going to solve all of our problems with AI. In the meantime, other people have their cautions about the usage of this kind of tool. Artificial intelligence, although, is increasingly present in our daily lives. Its use impacts the quality of the services we use, the products we buy, and how we relate to one another. Its impact on how we produce and how we consume is certain. For example, China's strategic development goals states that until 2025, its entire economy will be impacted by AI. The public sector plays a very important role, not only in regard to the public policies to boost this ecosystem for the private sector, but also as a user and a developer of such solutions. As I told you, our focus today is the application of AI in the legislative houses and in the legislative process. Okay, we understand AI can also be applied successfully, and we do have cases of that to prove on the oversight of the executive power by parliaments. But this topic will be presented in the next debates. Legislative houses are a huge hub of information about the debates happening in each society. And this data can be used to enhance the debates and enhance the quality of legislative production. And this is our focus today. Even though the production of such solutions is focused on legislative houses, we understand the entrepreneurial ecosystem has an important part to play on this development. And that's why we compose this panel today with examples from legislative houses in Brazil and also in Europe. And also we invited an entrepreneur developing such solutions to follow the legislative process. I would like to give my welcome to Mr. Ludovic Delepiné from the European Parliament, Fabricio Santana from the Senate House in Brazil, Patricia Almeida from the House of Representatives in Brazil, and Raphael Caldas from Inteligov in Brazil. Our debate will take around 2 hours today, exceptionally. And in this first half of our debate, I will invite all of our speakers to present their cases, their solutions, what they're doing in regard to artificial intelligence, and what are their insights about this particular theme. And in the second block, I will moderate a debate on this same topic, posing questions, provocations, and also inviting you to ask your questions and your comments as well. I'd like to ask Patricia Almeida to make her opening remarks. Patricia, be most welcome to our webinar today.
Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, Luis, very much for the invitation. Again, it's an honor to be here. Despite the differences among legislative houses, a common interest has increased in the last years. The wish, the desire to improve themselves digitally. Nowadays, the need for a digital transformation has been challenging all of them. Firstly, because building a digital government doesn't mean the same as building a digital parliament. In a government, services are delivered directly to the citizens, whereas in a parliament, the citizen participation makes MPs as a major actor of the services. Thus, digital services in a parliament must fit to this reality, must respect the autonomy of MPs. And I just want to share my screen. May I here? It's okay for you? Okay. So here in Brazilian House of Representatives, we have designed our digital transformation, grouping digital services in thematic platforms. Thus, we have platforms for legislative work, legislative process, a platform for interaction with citizens, and platforms for administrative services. The communication between platforms and between services inside the platform are strongly dependent on data. And the quality of the automation depends basically on two factors. First, the quality of data, of course, but it also depends on the what we make with those data and how we make it. And because of that, we are focused on a data governance. And we are considering artificial intelligence as an important pillar of our digital transformation. On this purpose, machine learning became a powerful design, a powerful driver, a powerful pillar for us. And materializing this perception, the Directorate of Innovation and IT created Ulysses. Ulysses is a set of AI algorithms to face the needs of the house that wouldn't be possible to be done by human resources, and respecting the representative democracy. Our AI strategy considered that the algorithms would be split into blocks, a block for legislative work and transparency and another for administrative services. The first block, basically, it offers a high quality information in a timely manner to MPs and to those who support their work. It's worth to highlight that we have a special concern on the autonomy of MPs regarding this kind of service. And with a bit more freedom, the other algorithms that are used by the administrative services can decide by themselves without any human intervention. And at the moment, we are working on our AI governance model. We are at the beginning, and we want to make it as more simple as possible, but we need it. We needed to deal with AI ethical issues and to manage AI risk, avoiding biases, discrimination, and any kind of problems in decisions. And one thing is very clear for us. We have to consider the whole life cycle of an AI product, starting with the purpose of the product, design, the phase of designing, development, testing, teaching, the learning phase of the algorithm, use and support. And we do believe that choosing an AI, adopting an AI systems must be embedded in a context, must be embedded in a strategy.
Thank you, Patricia. I would like to invite Mr. Ludovic Delepiné to make your presentation as well. Ludovic, you have the floor.
And thank you also for making this webinar in English and forcing you to speak English when my Portuguese is extremely bad. Thank you very much. I would just like to take one of the dimensions that was introduced by Patricia, which is about ethics, just to introduce the topic. The ethics of using AI in the political process. In this context, European initiatives tend to follow the lead of the European Union Charter for Fundamental Rights, It was enforced in the Lisbon Treaty on the 1st December 2009. And this charter contains several AI-relevant rights and freedoms while drawing further inspiration from wider sources. And in this context, AI systems must not threaten dignity, integrity, liberty, privacy, safety, and of course, security of human beings in society and work. And AI system should not limit or condition the democratic process, freedom of expression, or the possibility to refuse AI services. So do we have opportunities for the use of AI in the legislative process? Yes, of course. It was introduced by Patricia. I will not spend more time because the presentation was extremely clear on this way. And I will mainly focus on the legislative side, the support for the deputies rather than one from the administration, even if we always have both dimension and benefits on both domains. Once we are talking about opportunities of deploying new solutions, we are also talking about requirements. So these are the conditions that you have to fulfill in order to address this domain. And within AI projects, there are mainly 4 domains that we have to address. The first one is about data. AI is mainly about data. So collecting, handling data responsibility, and using representative data sets to train and test AI models. So that's really a cornerstone. The second one is computing capacity. And it's true that we have the laws more, and we every year are doubling the capacity of our computers. And that's extremely important to keep in mind that all these algorithms used in AI request time, they request space, they request data lakes. So that's a huge environment you have to set up, and you need to be ready to have a huge capacity. Of course, you need to have AI algorithm engineers. You need to have people who understand all the algorithm to use in which context. And it's quite important to consider them as being engineers and not necessarily researchers. AI has moved now from the research domain to the applied domain, and you need to have people who are engineers. So you could use students coming from universities or engineer schools that could be extremely helpful by deploying AI solution. You don't need to have a PhD anymore to claim that you can do AI. And the last domain is a supportive policy environment. And this is the 4th domain. Of course, in the European Union, we have one which is the main that we are using, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, that GDPR already contains some domains which are AI compatible, even if the EDPS, which is a data protector, claim that they will reinforce the approach toward the control of data and ensuring ethics toward their framework, and they are working heavily on this. One last publication was in June 2020 that they really want to work within this domain. So how to try to apply AI into the legislative process? Let's take a very simple representation of what the legislative process could be. I don't know if you can share a diagram. We had an exchange before, but this one is just a representation, right? So it's composed of 6 different domains. The first one is forward planning and agenda setting. So what does it mean? It means defining goals, taking into account future circumstances when establishing political priorities to maximize the impact on the society. And at this level, this is mainly foresight. What you want to do is to identify megatrends for the future. So you are very on the early stages of how to plan really in advance the different policies you will address. And this was one of the first domain, if we go to the 50s, it's one of the first domain that was used by the United States in order to try to see how to use these computers for national policies. The second one is to establish a legislative proposal. For this one, it's a consultation and explanatory phase on pre-impact assessment to define a draft proposed law. And in this context, we are more discussing about future-proof legislation. So it's a kind of new concept that emerged a couple of years before. to try to prolong the longevity and effectiveness of legislation, take into account the interests of future generation, and promote legislative and regulatory flexibility and innovation. And very often there's two ways to do it. The first one is experimental law, and the second one is future-proof impact assessment. And we have a relation also with the first one, the first domain I was talking about future planning and agenda setting through foresight. Foresight is one of the domains that you can address with AI by trying to avoid bias about research, cultural value, attention, interest, and also getting insights from multiple perspectives, whether they can be demographic, social, technological, economic, environmental, political, legal, or ethical. So this is really a cross-policy analysis in which you could absolutely use AI. Text analysis techniques are one of the domains which can also be very useful in this context. Citizen participation. So when you establish a legislative proposal, you design a bill, this is really a moment in which you can have a range of mechanisms to facilitate deliberative and policy processes at your national or European Union level. And this includes the European Citizens Initiative, for instance, or this can also include citizens' consultation. And one of them has just been closed by the European Commission about a white paper on artificial intelligence. It has been closed in June, by which all the civil society was consulted on about 50 questions, more or less, about how to define and what could be the comment from the civil society for the use of AI. And for this type of citizen consultation, for instance, since 2016, the European Commission made 1,733. So something which is a tool which is widely used. The third step would be the adoption of the legislation. So this one is a law. In this case, you can use AI through trend analysis or through remote activities with a high level of security, such as biometric information that you may use in order to secure the exchanges on how to vote, who is currently voting on what. So all these domains related to security for law adoption. The fourth domain, once you know where you go, you establish your bill, how you will think, you define your law, so you adopt the law, then you need to implement the adopted legislation, or in the European Union, you need to transpose your legislation. And this gives force to the adopted legislation by passing appropriate implementation measures. In this case, of course, you may have the use of huge text analysis techniques to large law referential to see how consistent will be your law when you will decide to implement this new legislation. The fifth step is then evaluating the legislation in practice. You have adopted the law, but of course you expect to have some post-impact assessment to verify if the adopted legislation has reached its objectives. And you can imagine that this is extremely huge when you adopt a new law on agriculture, for instance. Well, you may have huge data sets to collect to verify whether the initial expectations to adopt a law have really delivered what was supposed to be. And in this context, data analysis techniques really are crucial. You've got there a cycle, and of course, in the middle, you've got your stakeholder informations. And the stakeholder information is how to provide information to the civil society on the various steps of the legislative cycle. And you could do that or by providing tailor-made information on the status of the legislative cycle. You can perform multimodal sentiment analysis to see how people are reacting toward the law that has been put in force and know that starts to have effects and impacts. And you can also provide open data related to the various steps of the legislative cycle. So these are mainly just a brief representation of what could be a legislative process and which actions could be taken inside and how AI could be used within these domains. how are we doing in the Parliament with AI currently? So in production, we mainly have soft votes. So that's one of the dimensions we used. I wouldn't say this is the most simple one, even if I say it. That's the simplest approach right now to build soft vote on closed words. So we apply soft votes for conference organization, also for how to practice in the context of the pandemic COVID-19 situation. And we are also using AI for one of the dimensions related to the administration, which is how to allocate translators when we have to translate a set of text in 24 languages, knowing that they have some constraints to respect in terms of capacity, so smart allocator assistant. And currently in development, we have 3 different trends, one being deep writing, and this is currently what we do with the archives, taking a huge set of documents and trying to make a synthesis of this one and proposing a synthesis, continuing the delivery of new soft votes and performing on our documents semantic text analysis. And this one we apply an algorithm, a set of algorithms that has been defined by the European Commission through the Joint Research Center, which is in Italy, and this one called SETA. And this is the one that we are currently introducing in the Parliament. Of course, when we are talking about AI, we also are talking about bias. Bias, AI learns from how the society works, I would say, and as represented in its data. So since human societies have structural bases and inequalities, inevitably machine learning tools learn these ones too. So there are a set of efforts which has to be made to really train the algorithm on data sets which are sufficiently broad and cover all relevant scenarios needed to avoid dangerous situations, but also to ensure that these data sets are sufficiently representative. In the end, what will be fundamental is also to ensure the privacy and personal data are adequately protected, whatever systems are. In the end, and just to conclude this part, what we need to ensure finally is the human autonomy. So whatever we use in terms of AI system, we have first to ensure that AI is capable of explaining its decision in an accurate and understandable way. So that's self-explaining AI. That's the first side. And the second one is that humans can immediately halt automated activities. That's what we call the kill switches. So at any moment, human beings can take their hand back from what AI is doing. So very briefly introduced some views and some thoughts about how to use AI in the legislative process.
Thank you, Ludovic. Thank you for your opening remarks. I'd like to invite Fabricio Santana to make your opening considerations as well. Be most welcome, Fabricio. You also have the floor.
Thanks, Luis, for inviting me to talk to your audience about artificial intelligence applied to the legislative process. It's an honor to be here beside so qualified speakers representing the Federal Senate of Brazil and share what we have been doing regarding AI. I have been working at the Federal Senate's IT office, known as PRODASEM, for 10 years. My involvement with artificial intelligence started back in 2017, but we have reference of AI projects developed here since the 90s. I would like to start with a curiosity. The term parliament comes from the French parler, which means speak in English. In such a way, the parliament is a house of words. I mean, the natural language, written or spoken, is the main tool of the congressman's work. For this reason, in my opinion, the biggest opportunity of AI in the legislative process is applying natural language processing on it. My contribution with this webinar is organized in main 3 points. First, I will go back to 2017 to show studies carried out by public servants from PRODASEM. The studies led us to the publication of a book titled Automated Extraction of Legislative and Legal Information. This is a literal translation from Portuguese to English. The book was written in Portuguese. After talking about what we have studied and published, I will present 4 initiatives that are currently being developed in Prolazen. To finish my contribution, I will share our plan to the future and some additional considerations. So let's get started here. As I said, since 2017, we have been studying AI, and I would like to highlight 5 results that we have achieved so far. First of all, we published 7 datasets with the structured text of Brazilian laws and a paper describing the datasets. It's valuable to mention, as Ludovic said, that the kind of AI we are using is totally dependent on data. So extremely relevant to publish datasets to be used by others. Additionally, the availability of the datasets was a contribution to the Open Data Government, which is our OECD project that aims to improve public transparency, citizen engagement, and research based on data. Using the published datasets, we built a named entity recognition system. In our case, the named entity recognition will improve indexing of Brazilian tax laws and the thesaurus. Besides that, we also use these datasets to build an AI to extract definition in tax laws. The definition extraction can be used to produce a glossary with minimal human intervention. Using a different dataset, we trained an AI to classify requests to the legislative consultants based on the subject matter of the request. I mean, depending on the subject matter of the request, it's automatically classified and assigned to the correct specialist team. And finally, different from the other 4 works that we use some sort of natural language processing, we also developed a convolutional neural network for facial recognition of the senators. To accomplish this, we built a dataset with thousands of facial images and trained a deep neural network to do the recognitions. So I have covered the 5 initiatives that we have been doing since 2017. Now I will share our current initiatives regarding AI. One of our objectives we are pursuing for the next few years is to improve efficiency through streamlining work process. To achieve such a goal, we are conducting several projects. I will highlight the ones we use AI techniques. Initially, we will deploy the facial recognition system we started studying in 2017 in committees to register presence and votes. After that, we will use a voice recognition AI to support automatic transcription from audio and video to text. One of the biggest challenges to accomplish in this project is the identification of speakers in plenary sessions. In other words, knowing the identity of who is speaking in a given time. Another project will use machine learning to index and classify bills, tax laws, and pronouncements. Lastly, we will use machine learning to predict words during the production of the legislative texts. The next word prediction will be realized by developing a custom language model fitted with legislative vocabulary, which can be used later for diverse purposes. Well, these 4 last projects that I have mentioned here is our current project. We are working on that right now. And now I will enter in our future planning, or I mean, what we are planning to do in the future after we have completed these projects. So for the future, we are looking forward to using AI in translation of tax laws to promote comparative legislation. This will probably be done in partnership with the Chamber of Deputies, whose representative here is Patricia, in a context of a multilingual norms project from the IPU, Interparliamentary Union. Another possible future work is to build an AI to track and compile the legislation text over time. The compilation of legal text is made by analysis of text and producing semantic relations between norms, such as inclusion, revoke, change, and so on. Then, a process consumes those relations and creates a new version of the text in a certain point of time, like after and before some change. One problem that we face today, and could be solved by AI in the future, is to identify semantically related proposed bills. This is relevant because a lot of bills are proposed all the time, and a number of them address a similar matter in a similar way. Finally, a challenging project could address the consistency across a complex corpus of norms. This is very important because it affects legal certainty. One of the traditional tools available to deal with that is the consolidation of concurrent norms. Consolidation is a process that brings together in a single text a legal matter spread in many different legal texts. One way to realize consolidation is using named entity recognition techniques to identify legal institutions. That can be used, these legal institutions, once identified, can be used as a driver of this process, of the process of consolidation of the norms. Beyond that, in order to keep the rationality of the legal order, an AI could also assist the consolidation of legal texts. The consolidation assisted by AI can be done in two steps. First, by identifying norms addressing a certain matter and proposing a new bill with the consolidated text and revoking clause. Well, I think I have covered the three main points that I planned to discuss here today. I talked about how we started AI adoption in 2017, what we are doing today, lastly, what we plan to do in the future. So that's my contribution for this moment.
Thank you, Fabricio. I would like to invite Patricia again to take the floor. She will deep dive us to the initiatives being implemented by the Director of Technology of the House. Patricia, please, you have the floor again.
Well, we have dozens of algorithms in our plan, but I have selected only 6 of them to show to you. And our first case is at the beginning, the starting point of the legislative process, when an MP demands a technical study to support a new bill. This demand must be sent to a Department of Internal Legislative Staff skilled to make it. Here we have a department to deal with it, with 160 civil servants, experts in lawmaking process. They are distributed in 22 fields of knowledge, and you have to decide which group of experts will be in charge of this work. And the process of choosing the group of experts was made by an internal staff who spent a lot of time reading the whole text of the demands, and it was strongly dependent on the interpretation of each reader. And now, Ulisses analyzes semantically the text of the demands, pages and pages, and offers 3 possible groups, showing a percentage of to demonstrate the likelihood of each group, and sends it to an internal staff to send the demand, to choose the demand, choose the group, and send the demand. But it's important to highlight that this is a case of natural language process. We consider not only the metadata, but also the natural language used in the whole text. And after 2 years using this algorithm, this department asked us to exclude this actor, to make this part of the decision automatic. And in spite of being part of a legislative work, this is an administrative process, and it's fine. It's in accordance with our strategy. In our second case is at the same department, at the beginning, at the starting point of the legislative process, after having distributed the the demand to the experts, we are working on an algorithm of Ulysses to search similar technical studies and similar bills, regardless the legislative process phase in which the bill is, and sends the results to the experts in a way that they can decide if it's a case of notifying the MP about the similarities. But undoubtedly, this result is very, very rich for their work in many, many situations. And our target is to improve a bit more and to find impacts between bills, to evaluate these algorithms in order to find impacts between bills. Our third case is a case of face recognition. In our communication department, there is a process of tagging the videos and photos produced by them, and associating the names of MPs that were in the meetings, only public meetings, sessions, committee meetings, events. But this is a work that spent a lot of time, not only with the tagging task, but also with the lag to send the photos and videos. And last year, we launched a product, digital service for MPs and for their the staff of their cabinet that had a lot of functionalities. And one functionality was an algorithm that Ulysses that recognized the MPs by their faces in the meetings and tagged the videos and photos, moved them to an area of each, in a way that each MP could select his and her or her photos and send to their social media very, very quickly. And the MPs you make it just using their smartphone. I will show you further a video demonstrating this face recognition. Our fourth and fifth case are related to transparency and interaction with citizens, both in our website. The fourth case is a functionality in our website that group the whole content of the website according to the interest of the citizen. So just for instance, I have chosen human rights, and automatically everything was organized, and we can see news, bills, electronic polls, everything in the committees, speeches, technical studies, and legislation about human rights automatically. In our fourth case, it is still as a project. It is our chatbot, which has already learned how to answer questions about MPs, and now we are starting to teach it about the whole legislative process and about the bills, where they are, and so on. I ask you just a few seconds to show you a video in which Márcio Fonseca, one of our machine learning engineer, will show a bit.
Hi,
about
I'm
them.
Márcio Fonseca, a machine learning engineer at the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies. In this video, I'm going to show an overview of how we apply machine learning to improve transparency and citizen participation in our parliament. The Chamber produces a large amount of textual data, including laws, bills, speech transcriptions, and research documents. It is important to have a cost-effective way to index this data for content organization and, in many cases, distributing the demands to the appropriate specialists. Using natural language processing algorithms, we built text classifiers that automatically identify the type of the text and also the main subjects that are addressed by the document. This is one example of how we use text classifiers to create new ways of delivering information on our web portal. We create the section called themes that aggregates the textual information related to a specific subject, such as economics, health, or education. This is the first step towards our goal to make content recommendations and adapt our website according to the user interests. We also integrate the API with our internal systems. In this case, Ulysses recommends the most likely related subjects as the user registers a new bill. These recommendations help to streamline the internal processes and also improve the quality of the data at the origin. Another important source of information we have is video content. Many internal processes such as speech transcription, TV broadcasts, and plenary operations depend on the information of the current speaker. We have working prototypes of face recognition pipelines that can identify multiple faces of deputies in the scene, even during live broadcasts. This solution will greatly reduce the cost of audio and video indexing that currently requires labor-intensive human annotation. Given the success of the first prototypes, we are testing end-to-end hardware and software solutions from the market that would allow us to scale face recognition to all plenaries. Finally, we are experimenting with new paradigms to interface with the citizens. One such example is the chatbot. The idea is to create a new interface to offer the same kind of information already available in our web portal, like MP's contact info and expenditures, but in this case, using a more natural conversational format. This is a quick demo of the chatbot. Let's say I would like to know about the MPs from the southern region. So Ulysses returns a list of deputies grouped by states and gives me a link to access them. Now, I would like to know about the MPs from the federal district. And how about the female MPs? I can also query a specific MP. I can access basic information such as expenses. But why do MP budgets exist anyway? Ulysses gives me a nice explanation for that. I'd like to know how much Rodrigo Maia spent with travel in April this year. Makes sense. No expenses in April. And how about the expenses last month? So the expenses are presented here, July 2020. I can also ask for bills by Rodrigo Maia. There you go, so that's one bill in 2020. And of course I can search bills for any other MP. And also drill down by theme. So now I want to know about projects about education by Tabata Amaral. And here I can see a list of the most recent bills presented by Tabata. Okay, so let's thank Ulysses. Thanks for watching.
And backing to our examples, our cases, the last case I've chosen to you. It's also a case of interaction with citizens. We have a lot of digital services to interact with them. Each channel has its own audience. It's associated with a special profile group of the society, and each source has its own way to analyze the contributions, the opinions of the citizens. And we don't have a deep analysis on those texts. Now we are working on an algorithm of Ulysses to analyze that analyzes deeply using natural language processing the contributions from the electronic poll, and we want to extend it to the rest of the channels. Our electronic polling is a bit different from the others. We only not only ask for if the citizen is in favor or against a special bill. We also offer a text box, in which the citizen can type everything that he or she thinks about the bill, giving the opinion in a natural language. And the challenge is to treat everything and to make a broad view about the most contribution in favor, the most arguments in favor and against. We are working on it now. And more, we wanted not only to expand to the other channel, but to build a broad view, joining the contribution of all them, coming from all channels related to a specific bill, and organize it in a way to be exposed to MPs and to citizens, regardless the legislative process phase in which the bill is in. And I have also a video to show it to you.
The Chamber of Deputies collects opinions about the bills that are being discussed. The most popular bills receive thousands of comments that are classified as positive or negative. It would be very time-consuming for humans to process all this information manually. To help in this poll analysis, we added a text summarization module to Ulysses, which is capable of generating a short list of comments that capture the most salient ideas. We use powerful language modeling tools to map sentences to a semantic representation that can be processed by machines. Here's how the comments would be distributed in the vector space. Red dots indicate comments in favor, while the blue ones indicate comments against the bill. Comments with higher semantic similarity tend to appear closer to each other. So, we can leverage clustering algorithms to automatically find relevant groups, and then extract the most representative sentence that will form an extractive summary. And this is a demonstration of the poll analysis application. In this case, out of more than 13,000 contributions, Ulysses groups the most important positive and negative comments and gives a relevance score for each sentence. The user can also see a list of the most similar comments in the cluster. And finally, explore different number of sentences in summary. Thanks for watching.
Just for concluding this project about the opinion of the citizens, you saw just the beginning. We have a lot of many steps to explore it more, as I said. Maybe more 12 months in this work. So it would be a pleasure to show it after concluded. And as Fabricio said, we are coordinating a group in the IPU, Interparliamentary Union, in which we can build a website to show that data, open data from bills and laws of all parliaments in the world. The idea is not only to put the open data available to a world citizen, but also to make to build a powerful search engine to everyone that work inside the parliament, that work in the lawmaking process, can use it to get in a few clicks everything that happens that has been discussed in parliaments. We have already finished a POC, a proof of concept, and we have a long path to the end. And regarding the whole initiatives, a long path. But despite of being aware of the long path to be paved, the results that we received motivate us to continue in this direction. Thanks. Thanks very much, Luís.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you for your remarkable presentation. And also thank you for Márcio Fonseca for taking the time to share his expertise with us as well. I would like to invite to the floor Raphael Caldas. Raphael, be most welcome to our event today. And feel free to take the floor and to make your initial presentation as well.
Thank you, Luís. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank everybody, Patricia, Ludovic, also Fabricio from the Senate, for sharing such great initiatives. Sometimes when we're on the other side of the desk, we only have access to the more basic stuff the houses are doing, like open data, XML files, and JSON APIs, and we don't know about all these incredible things they are developing. A lot of them already at our reach, but some of them not yet, and we hope we'll have access to a lot of these soon. Câmara and Senado here in Brazil are really great references for every parliament, I think. Not only inside Brazil, we have a very complex federal system with around 5,500 local governments and 27 states or provinces, 26 states and one federal district. So it's a very complex system where the local governments have a lot of legislative power. And I think these examples set in the national government are really, really necessary and really inspiring for all of us. So thank you. It's really nice to be here and share our experience, to tell about our my history and Inteligov's history. I'm a lawyer, and I've started practicing around 1990, well, around the mid-90s. Let's not get too specific, but I've worked for around 15 to 20 years on the federal, state, and local governments in the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches. So I have one first-person knowledge of how things work, and then I started my private practice. And around 2013 or to 14, I saw the opportunity to transform some systems I had in place to use for the services I provided, to transform it into a product. And that's how Inteligov was born. Let me share my screen. My idea here, it's hard to be the last one on such a qualified panel. Please tell me if you can see my presentation here, because I don't have access now to what you're seeing. So in 2013 to 14, Inteligov was born, and I'll try to bring another perspective here, as I said, from the private sector, and how we are experimenting with legislative data and using AI. We have clients from the private sector, big companies, but we also have clients from the public sector, like the Brazilian Supreme Court or BNDES, which is a national investment bank for development. And we also are very proud to have third sector organizations amongst our clients, like Transparency International, the Brazilian chapter. And they're all players that are very impacted by changes in legislation. So we started in 2014 being basically a data fetcher that simplified getting timely data from different sources. And along these years, we've managed to compile a lot of data. So now we have around 3 million bills in our data sets, around 2.2 million votes from legislators, 300,000 speeches, with sum up to around 170 million words. And we decided a while ago, about a year and a half to 2 years ago, to start extracting more intelligence from this set of data. So I'll share with you some cases, some already in production, some in the works, but I think they all bring some insight on what we're doing and what we can do together. So the first one I like to share is something we recently made available using prediction analysis to predict the likelihood of approval of a given bill. We have clients that monitor from 15,000 to 20,000 bills, given the complexity of our federal system, as I said. So it's really hard to manage risk when you have such a high volume of data. And we try to bring light to what is most likely to be approved, what is most likely to be rejected. And this has been a really nice addition to our set of tools, because we allow our clients to focus where they need to focus. And but I'd like to talk a little about this as an example, a recent example, when a bill was passed by the Senate that was setting a ceiling for the interest rates financial institutions could charge for credit cards and checking books. So the thermometer was pointing a 99% chance of approval, and the bill was approved. I was quite surprised, actually. I was very skeptical when I saw this metric, and I said, "Wow, will be our first embarrassing shortcoming," because financial institutions here in Brazil having their interest rates blocked even during the pandemic. I don't believe so, but that's exactly what happened. And it took us a while, a little over a year, to get this model working the way we wanted it to. We had to actually develop two different models, one for the lower house and another one to the upper house. And the first challenge was, of course, accuracy. After training the model to see how it performed, if it was giving good or bad matches. And then we reached another very common problem, which is overfitting. When you think you have a very good accuracy, but in fact you have a bad sample. You've trained your algorithm with some data that has a kind of bias, and you don't have reliable responses outside of your training set. And then we also had to deal with something called the confusion matrix, which is a very interesting concept. That is how well your model performs in matching false positives and false negatives. So it was something like this, and this is basically how we evolved our models to predict this data. So at first you have a very good accuracy. You said, wow, I'm around 92%. This is good. But then when you go to the confusion matrix, you see that you're really good at getting right when a bill is approved, but you're performing really bad when you're pointing if the bill is actually going to the archives and not passing. So we have a lot of work to do to establish some kind of harmony, a good balance between the false positives and false negatives. So this was pretty hard, and I think we have achieved a really good result. We had good results with the most important bills passed over this semester, like the new Brazilian traffic code, which was 99% our prediction, and the bill got passed. The new sanitation bill, which also got passed, and our prediction was 89%. So we're happy, but we're waiting for our first significant misses, which I think are also important. I think it's something Ludovic mentioned, when you bring this data to actual production, to actual use, you need this phase of interaction and continuous feedback to improve your models. And everything leads to this. I think it's a crucial problem, especially for legislative houses, which is explainability, which must always be a concern for your algorithms, your models. You need to talk to non-technical people. You need to talk to citizens, explain decisions, and you should be able to do so in a very practical and layman's term. So this was the first case. Another one, there'll all be more succinct. I have just 3 more. We are also working with natural language processing and the efficacy of public policy. During the pandemic, we had this site which is open to the public that monitors which bills are being proposed and which regulations are being published by the executive branches in the official press. And it's mainly a system of alerts. You can search. We have some aggregated data that you can view in graphics. We started also, this is to be released, I think, this week, but we are cross-referencing data from the number of deaths in each city and the total budget from federal grants they had, and trying to get to public sector efficiency in expenditure. So we have lots of data on how policy is being made and which results are being generated in fighting the COVID-19 here in Brazil. So we partnered with a French company, Experian, Serasa Experian here in Brazil, with their data lab. And they, together with us and a lot of other companies, released this initiative, which is called COVID Radar. And the specific terms of our partnership is to do a post-mortem. This is not a great term, but after the pandemic is over, try to understand with natural language processing which public policies were more or least efficient in dealing with the challenges brought by the coronavirus. So the idea is to identify, well, these regions that had lesser deaths, they had this kind of legislation. The schools were closed for longer periods, or trying to identify or to prove or disprove this hypothesis that public policy may in fact have played an important role during the pandemic here. The other example is recommendations. This is a pretty a simple one, and it's very easy to get grasps with it, because we're used to this in our day-to-day lives. We use it on Netflix, on Amazon. Oh, you watched this movie, you like this one, you bought this book. Every other person that bought it also bought this other one. So we try to do the same for our clients. And this also relates to something that was mentioned before, that it's something I think AI brings the most to the table when it does something a human can't do. Process large volumes of data and try to find patterns when our most close focus, we make it impossible for us to see this pattern. So it's giving this bird's eye view and trying to extract some intelligence from it. So the idea is to identify which patterns appear in a given client's what we call matrix. It's the whole group of bills they follow, they favorited, quote unquote. And the idea is to then crossing this with what we call popularity, suggest other bills that may impact their interests, their organizations. So we have some bills they follow from the lower house, the lower federal house, and then we suggest, well, given that you follow this bill, you might be interested in this other one from the state legislature, or this other one from a local house. And the final example here is about the stakeholder management. I saw that it's something all of you care about, all of the other panelists, which I think it's great. Is the stakeholders in this sector we work on is something very important, and not only from the outside in, but also from inside out. So we try to we offer our clients this ability to try to identify which stakeholders are more or less aligned with each other, so that they can form a more strong coalition given a subject. Who are the stakeholders for a given issue? So issues management is something really substantial that was brought up here, like when Patricia talked about the themes menu that they made in the lower house, and how this can help you identify bills, speeches that are related to your interests, and also trying to identify which stakeholders, and here it's about entity extraction, which stakeholders are more closely related to each theme, and in the end being able to put them in a matrix we call power versus interest. So we have 4 quadrants, and where is this stakeholder given all we processed from meetings, from speeches, from bills? Where do you place each stakeholders given his power to affect this issue and her interest in affect this issue? So this is another project that's in development here. As my final remarks, I just wanted to take one step back, and I think we need to also discuss digital inclusion, so that we really have an efficient digital citizenship. So I borrowed this from an NHS website from the UK, and they talk about three main points which I think are the core. We need to have the skills to use digital services. We need to empower our population to use the services. We need to ensure that they have connectivity, not only access to internet, but broadband, Wi-Fi, and mobile technologies, and also pay close attention to accessibility, so that despite of any user's lack of special needs, they need to be included. We had a difficult example here in Brazil recently. Given the pandemic, we have in place a welfare system to provide some kind of salary compensation for families. Now I'm not finding the word here to define, but the government paid a sum of money, guarantees a sum of money to the people who are in need. But people who are the most vulnerable, like the homeless people here in São Paulo, had a very hard time accessing this benefit because it was all very well planned. You have a mobile app where you can ask for the benefit and you receive an SMS with a single code that you need to confirm your identity. But, well, the homeless people don't have mobile phones and they can't, you need one single phone for one single benefit. So I think we need to take a step back and also think of digital inclusion. And finally, I could not let to mention this incredible team that works with us. We are all based on 5 pillars that we always talk about, which is trust, innovation, excellency, kindness, and lightheartedness. So I'd like to thank this tiny but fantastic team that is constructing great things together. So thank you all.
Thank you, Raphael. What a remarkable presentation. And thank you, Fabricio, Ludovic, and Patricia as well. What some interesting insights. I'm seeing here a colleague from the Pan-African Parliament, Mr. Jacob, saying, okay, what are you not doing? And I can make a chorus here with him. So what is not the Brazilian and the European Parliament and the Brazilian entrepreneurial ecosystem not doing to improve the legislative activity? And when I see such a qualified initiative in the field of AI, we understand that this is the tip of the this is the frontier development. So we are discussing a cutting-edge development applied to the legislative houses. We are not discussing, this is not the beginning of the road. So you have passed through a series of transformations to get there. And I can prove these when we look at the remote deliberation systems, for example. We see these houses deliberating remotely and creating a new paradigm on how Parliament can work during pandemics and how technology is an ally to the legislative houses. And as Patricia mentioned, never diminishing the power of the MPs, but enhancing it and qualifying the legislative production. I will follow to our second block of our today's webinar, posing a few questions to you. I will ask each of you to answer in more or less 3 minutes, so we can be inside the time frame. I'd like to ask Mr. Ludovic. Ludovic, could you share what are the challenges to elaborate an AI project inside a legislative house? I also wanted to add, in your view, which aspects of the EU Parliament experience should be considered in a national parliament for its AI strategy applied to the legislative process?
Well, thanks for both questions. The first one about challenges to elaborate AI projects. I would summarize these challenges throughout 4 challenges. The first one is cultural readiness. You need to explain what AI is, what is a benefit that you can get, what the resources you will use. So explaining people, demystify what AI is. AI is not a Robocop. So really working on the educational side. What is AI? The second one is technology readiness. You need to acquire capacity, so really, and to also acquire algorithm. So that's the second domain. The third one is competency. We are working in administration, we are working in public services. It's not very often that you have people who are competent in AI. Sometimes you may have, but it's not necessarily the case. I started my PhD something like 1992 in AI, so I'm quite old-fashioned in the domain, even if I try to stay up to date. But it's rare to have AI people in public services. So you need to acquire this competency and to work with also external providers. So having a win-win situation by which you will increase your internal knowledge and use services from people who are experts in these technologies. And the last one is compliance and ethics. And that's really a challenge. Very often people think, well, data is there, so I can use it. Well, it's not necessarily exactly like that. So being compliant with internal rules, with frameworks is extremely important, and ethics. So how do I use data? I am authorized to use this data, and I am right to use this data in this way. So cultural readiness, technology readiness, competency, and compliance and ethics for me are really 4 challenges that we have to assess. In the view of how we can share experience with national parliaments, I would just like to relate one meeting that took place last October. So the European Centre for Parliamentary Research and Documentation, which is called ECPRD, held its ICT 2019 seminar in the Rêgo. So this is the Estonian Parliament in Tallinn. And the theme was artificial intelligence innovation in Parliament, so exactly what we are talking about. And we discussed, among other things, assistance services to members, legislative drafting, search of parliamentary videos, parliamentary reporting with example on speech to right, transparency and citizen participation. And of course, we had the privilege to have a speech from the colleagues from the Brazilian chamber, and with Patricia, who introduced the experiences and projects from the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies. So we discussed about that, and we could see that many parliaments are involved in AI project. But if I take the lessons learned that were made by the Directorate General for Innovation and Technological Support in the European Parliament, I would say these are mainly through networking and legal ethical observatory, the first one. The second one would be internal consistency. And the last one would be building proof of concepts. The first one is about how to ensure ethical use, lawful, safe and robust, secure and privacy compliant systems. Transparency and explainability was mentioned by Raphael, but that's true that it's really fundamental for that. So building a network and having an observatory for legal ethical view on the use of AI. The second one is about internal consistency. You can build internal consultancy on different ways. You can call that a competence center, you can call that an expertise center, but it's very important to group these people who are competent in AI in one place so they can act as internal service providers. And why grouping them? Because they will help what we call the business, so everything which is not IT is called business, so this is the other part of the world. So all the business side to build their own proof of concepts and to establish their own project based on these internal competencies that you've developed. So establishing this competence center and using it as an internal service provider, having a mix of internal resources and external resources, and then helping people taking benefits from the preparation of the proof of concepts and then delivering them. So I would say, more or less, this is what we could share in terms of experience. So networking, internal consultancy, and how to build proof of concepts and to run AI projects.
Thank you, Ludovic, for your answer. Patricia, as you have shared, and also Marcio have so brilliantly shared with us the projects being developed by DTech, the Office of Innovation and Technology of the House of Representatives here in Brazil. You successfully implemented a series of AI initiatives to enhance legislative activities. What are your recommendations for other national parliaments and also for the subnational houses that seeks to establish an AI strategy of their own without this expertise that House of Representatives has been building for years on developing tools to enhance the legislative process?
Thanks, Luís. Thanks for the question. if I were in their place, I would begin making questions. Questions for the leaders, questions to the team. How are our digital services? Where we want to be with the digital services? What are our major challenges to be there? Do they need AI? For what? Do I know, do we know deeply our data? Are they prepared to support a fair and a trustful machine learning algorithm? And after answer those questions, I would identify just one dimension and to focus on that. And the next step should be think about what could be made by acquirement and what must be made using internal staff. Or if it's a case of a contract with our university, we have made a contract with the university for researches. Another advice I would like to say is consider that AI systems needs more support than a traditional system, because they need support not only when the business changes, but also when the data change. So be aware about it. We have to put our data management, data governance team beside our machine learning engineers, almost together, because we have a lot of problems with data. Okay, so it would be a good advice. And just ending, I would suggest to be closer to the client. After the prototype, after have chosen to start a project, be very close to your client, because your first version won't be good, won't be nice, won't get a 10 remark. And your client must be with you, training, teaching, giving feedback every day, and trusting you. Okay? I would give those advice.
Thank you, Patricia. Fabricio, as you have explained on your opening remarks, the Senate House in Brazil, through its IT office, Prodazem, is testing a few applications of AI in its legislative process. Could you share with us the technical and cultural challenges of a legislative house starting the application of AI in its legislative process? Based in your experience, what are the recommendations for other houses going through the same moment?
Good questions, Luis. You touch in maybe the most important points of adopting AI. An important cultural challenge of adopting AI is that this kind of project is seen as some sort of innovation project. As with all projects of this nature, you have a lot of risks and uncertainties. The point is the public sector prefers a risk-free approach to increase certainty of any endeavor. In such a way, the challenge is to introduce AI in the public sector. At the same time, we need to fill up tons of paperwork to address this variable. Another cultural aspect to mention is that IT departments are all time under pressure dealing with daily requests. For this reason, it's important to partner with business and to clarify what is in its potential, what AI is and its potential. This way, business can demand IT to use AI to improve and change the business. The partnership with business is also important for comprehension that AI adoption is a learning process. That's because I already saw AI projects being stopped because the first results were lower than expected. Again, AI adoption, it's a learning process. Things are going better over time. About the technical challenge, I will highlight two of them. The first one is about education. Without formal education in AI, we need to study by ourselves, and education is necessary for both technical and business staff. Self-study is time-consuming, and organizations need to understand it's an investment, not a cost. Another challenge that we faced during AI adoption was related to the necessary computer power to train AI models. Nowadays, it's easy and cheap to use search cloud providers that offers the right infrastructure at accessible cost with GPU, for example. At this point, the challenge is to fill up paperwork and convince all the clouds and convince all that a cloud service is necessary and the most cost-effective option. By the way, I don't recommend buying GPU servers. Instead, start using cloud service providers. Despite that, I think there are a lot of opportunities to introduce AI in the legislative process. One reason for this is because it's really stable and done by lots of predictable and repetitive tasks. More than that, over time, we are generating lots of data that can be used to train an AI to perform these tasks. For example, I said here before, we have in digital format the text of the federal laws, bills, pronouncements, audios, videos, and so on. As has been said, we have the gold and the oil to input in an AI to be applied in the legislative process. I hope I clarified the cultural and technical challenges we are facing in the Federal Senate of Brazil. And regarding your questions about recommendations for other houses, I would say that AI is a game changer. For this reason, everybody needs to put their foot in the water to check if it's cold or hot. I want to say, start soon, start small, start easy, or just start. Execute some pilot projects without expectations. This is a relevant step to understand the AI capabilities and opportunities. To start executing a pilot project, you don't need formalisms. To begin, you only need to build an in-house multidisciplinary AI team focused on identifying opportunities and studying and experimenting with all new stuff that is published every day. In the journey of AI adoption, keep in mind that you don't have to build everything from the ground. There are tons of code, APIs, architectures, papers, and so on that you can customize and reuse. Don't reinvent the wheel. Just use what is already done and test it. This is because what we are talking about here is applied AI or applied machine learning. So you don't have to make science. But keep in mind, it's not plug and play. A lot of effort is necessary to make it happen. Even to apply AI in practice, you need to train your team. I mean, train the technical team and business team, so both can understand the potential, limitations, and opportunities of AI. Sometimes I hear some hope that AI will solve all the problems and keep people's jobs. That's not the case yet. Having done some experimentation, built an in-house AI team, and trained it all, it's time to deploy an AI strategy. Build a vision on how AI will be applied in long term. At this point, you need to think about the data governance, architecture, risks, ethics, how AI services will be delivered and integrated in current softwares and processes, and so on. And last but not least, you need to communicate with teammates, partners, customers, and the community to put everybody in the same page. Following these 5 steps recommended by Professor Andrew sounds like a good starting point to introduce AI in any organization. That's my answer, Luis.
Thank you, Fabricio, for your answer. Raphael, I would like to return to you. Inteligov has developed its expertise on providing useful information from the legislative house to the private sector according to its stakeholder interest. In your view, which steps legislative houses at the national and subnational level should take to enable and enhance services such as those provided by Inteligov? Also, how can this expertise you have developed on the private sector might help legislative houses on their digital transformation project and their AI project of their own?
Well, starting by this last one, Luis, thank you for this question. I think we could help in many ways. I think the work Bússola Tech is doing, is pretty amazing in this sense of putting businesses and the public sector together to think about solutions, to feel the pains that are impacting the legislative procedures, and I think we may help each other a lot, be through education, like Fabricio was saying. So we could help business teams understand what AI actually is, what it actually isn't, and how the private sector is using it, and make them more sensible to these arguments. We could also think about common and open source features. We could all take part in the effort and share the benefits. Like, for instance, something that I think it's an awful deviation of citizenship here in Brazil is the social perception that a good legislator, a good member of parliament, is the one that presents the most bills. Oh, this other one didn't present more than 2 bills, so he didn't produce anything. So I think this is a great misconception. One of our biggest problems, I think, is the excess of regulation. So introducing more bills is not a great measurement of accomplishment of productivity. So I think, for instance, Patricia was mentioning their first project of identifying similarities. We could maybe think of building something together that would offer this I don't know how to put it, but similarity identification service at the disposal of every house. So we have less bills repeating the same issue. For instance, we recently dealt with the plastic straw legislation, bills banning the plastic straws from use because of the impact they have on the environment. And we saw one being born in Rio de Janeiro, then another one, a federal bill, then another one in Campinas, in the center of São Paulo, and all bills repeating the same thing. And it gets really messy, and no one knows what to do. And you forbid the straw, but then they're putting the coconut water in a plastic cup, which has way more plastic. So I think we can all get way more intelligent if we use our brains, our human natural brains, together to put in place some AI solutions together. Answering the first question, Luis, I think all we really need is transparency. Câmara and Senado are great in it, but we need more transparency for the subnational houses. And by transparency, I mean, first of all, having a website. There are lots of local governments that don't even have a website. So it's not just after that bridge is crossed, transparency is there in the sense of the data is available. The data must be structured in a similar way, in a machine, in a way a machine can understand it. Of course, we have ways of doing OCR and reading PDFs and paginating stuff, extracting data from video, audio. Okay, it's all good, but it had to be easier and it had to be standardized. And lastly, it has the data has to come in a timely fashion. It's not transparency if I know today of something that happened 15 days ago. I have to know it the closest possible from when something happened in government or in the legislative process. So I think transparency involves this three aspects, and that's how we would most be we would be most helped by the legislative houses.
Thank you, Raphael. Ludovic, I would like to start a new question for you. In your view, what are the major differences between implementing an AI project in the private sector, and not only on the private sector that follows the legislative process? I mean, the private sector like Google, Facebook, Twitter, and other productive sectors as agriculture or transport, etc. And the implementation of AI in the public sector, and here differentiating the executive power and what we are discussing, the legislative power. In your view, what are the major differences?
Well, huge question. Just maybe to try to make it simple. I think part of the difference was given by Fabricio during one of the comments he made on the last question. I would make a difference between private sector and public sector first. The main difference for me is risks. Public sector is risk adverse. So if you want to make a difference between private sector and public sector, the private sector can investigate emergent technologies, so they can take a lot of risks. And on the other side, for public services, whether they are executive power or legislative power, they have to use proven technologies. So for me, that's really the big difference. The private sector can take a lot of risk. You can try to use data, you can use discovery models, you can use algorithm without even knowing whether they will be applicable or which kind of result you may have, but you may have the feeling that there's something behind. So this is a risk that you can take in the private sector. In the public sector, you cannot take such a risk. You have to make cost-benefit analysis prior to start a project and to show that there's a real interest and you will concretely deliver something for your business or for your stakeholders or for your clients, depending how you want to call them. So really, for me, the difference between private and public sector is the risks that you're ready to invest in implementing a specific technology. No differencing executive power and legislative power. I would maybe make the difference between the domain that you would apply AI. If you are an executive power, you will more invest in technologies that will enable you to evaluate the legislation in practice. So you are using a set of resources, financial resources, human resources, in order to run specific legislation, and then you want to see how far this one is efficient. That's why you are an executive power. So really, the post-impact analysis is really one of the domain that they should invest. Was the use of the resources the most efficient one? So that's really a key point. If you are on the legislative power, I would say, even if it's a new trend, but investing in future-proof legislation, so how to establish a bill, investing in legislative proposal, forward planning, agenda setting, that's really the purpose of the legislative side. Of course, you have to take into account, as it was also mentioned by Raphael, not reinventing the wheel. If something was already made available somewhere, then why not reusing it? If you have different level of legislation and you have a kind of waterfall by which legislation could be implemented or transposed from one level of the state to another one, well, let's try at least to be consistent. And if it exists already somewhere, so let's make it shareable and ensure that you could apply to all the states the same law that would largely facilitate the way that you can manage the legislative side of the society. So I would make more of the difference between executive power and legislative power in the domain in which you could invest one side for the evaluation of the legislation, post-impact analysis, on the other side, future-proof legislation, so pre-impact analysis of the legislation.
Thank you, Ludovic. I will remain with you to our closing question. This question I will pose to every one of you, and it will be our last one. So, Ludovic, we understand the application of different AI tools may improve the effectiveness of the decision-making process and other managing issues within the legislative house. However, we know parliaments are political houses and political squares, and they are tasked with the duty to represent different sectors of our society and their interests, their demands, their beliefs. A well-implemented AI strategy may help the House staff on managing legislative affairs, as well as to increase the effectiveness of the House administration. However, its application in the political process requires a revision of certain paradigms about the decision-making process. What is your view about the usage of AI into political process within the legislative house?
Tricky question, but I would say we have to put in line AI and the democratic model that your entity is following. So we are in a representative democracy in the European Union. And in a representative democracy, all eligible citizens vote on representatives to pass law for them. And these representatives are called deputies or members, depending on the word you want to choose. But you have someone who represents you. So in our context, AI solutions for members can empower them to exercise their democratic mandate in accordance with the expectations of the new digital era. So that's really empowering members. We can discuss about e-information, about e-consultation, about e-decision making, but we always have to keep in mind that an efficient use of AI in our context will be to empower members because we are in a representative democracy.
Thank you, Ludovic. Patricia, would you like to comment the same question?
Yes. Thank you, Luís. As I said in the beginning of my presentation, and was well explained by Ludovic, the first thing is consider the nature of your parliament. Is it a representative democracy? Respect it, and let it clear for everyone that is involved in the whole process of developing, deciding, discuss, and make the digital transformation. But a second point I think is also important to highlight is that we are representing the society. So we must include this worth in the whole decisions related to AI. Our algorithms must identify all the groups. It's not acceptable any kind of biases. If it's a gold rule for all institutions, but imagine an institution that has in its mission to represent the society. Another point that we'd like to highlight is regarding the impacts. For any institution, it's important the best practice in AI. Avoid bias, take care of data, make everything transparent. But if you are dealing with a political process, everything is amplified. Everything can be understood absolutely different. So we must have the right data to explain everything that will have to be decided by the algorithms. And we must keep the whole life cycle of an AI product absolutely transparent, because your users are not your clients. Your users are hosts that are every day criticizing you too. I think those 3 points summarize the whole idea. Thanks.
Thank you, Patricia. Fabricio, would you like to answer this question as well?
It was good answers from Patricia and Ludovic. And I would like to bring here 3 points. The way we are using AI is to automate repetitive tasks in the first moment. So we have talked about a lot of this, automation repetitive tasks. And another important aspect of AI, it's a tool for improving democracy and citizen participation. So in this dimension, we need to think how an artificial intelligence can influence decision. What's the impact of people profiling, for example? And what are the ethics aspects of this use of artificial intelligence, for example? And what kind of risks the use of personal data could bring to the citizens? And lastly, we need to think about deepfakes. We are in an election year here in Brazil. So what impact of deepfakes that are a product of artificial intelligence could bring to the democracy and could bring to the result of the elections? So these are some points that we need to think. And the last, what is an important point to think, but not in the near future, is an artificial intelligence as a legislator. Maybe in the future, artificial intelligence could collect a lot of information around the world, identify and understand the legal order, and start addressing our questions, our matters, bringing new legislations. This will be best to me. This is a question I don't have the answer, but I think we need to think about it in the future.
Thank you, Fabricio. Raphael, would you like to answer this question as well?
I don't think I have much to add to all the experts who work from the inside. I think this is the view. You must enable the democratic model you're following. I think this is the way to go here in Brazil, since we have kind of a mixed model of majorly representative democracy, but some events of direct democracy, we need to combine both. But I just leave a provocation, something that came to the team when we started by developing a predictive analytics. And then in the election and the legislative process, you start to think, well, if I can point out that this bill will be approved and this bill will be rejected, if this machine can make this decision, can I really say that there's a democratic movement occurring if the machine was able to say, no, this thing here will be approved, this thing here will not be approved? Actually, how are the people expressing their desires? So it's just some food for thought that I think we all can take home.
It's really interesting to see your answers here. I'll try to summarize in a way I understand. Is with the current technology, we don't have, for example, the risk of what Sergio Falcão shared with AI as a legislator, but an AI as an enabler of changing behaviors on the legislative. So how can these technologies can improve or change behaviors through new functionalities available within the legislative set of applications and the legislative process as a whole. We are reaching the end of our webinar, unfortunately. I would like to ask each one of you to make your closing remarks and to try to inspire other houses or other entrepreneurs that seek to establish an AI strategy focused on the legislative process, and how your experience can inspire them. But there is a catch. Let's try to give this in one tweet or less. So really short. Ludovic, would you like to start?
A vocal tweet. If you really want to be inspired by AI, please have a look at the movie, which is called AlphaGo movie. It's amazing. You will then understand why AI will shape the world. This was a Chinese Sputnik moment by which China decided to create a brand new city called Zhongguancun, that is the equivalent of the Chinese Silicon Valley. And this is the moment where they decided to have massive investment in AI. So I know a tweet is not that long. So please, if you want to be inspired, have a look at the movie. It's not that long. And really carefully look move 37 on game 2 and the reaction of Lee Sedol on game 3. And then you will have the answer for what AI will be.
Thank you, Ludovic. Fabricio, would you like to make your closing remarks?
For sure. And Ludovic bring a really good example of AlphaGo that expressed that AI is a game changer. So embrace the change. And to make it happen, I would say involve business and other stakeholders. Start soon, as I said, start small, start easy, and take care of your data. Train your technical and business team and keep yourself updated to make good decisions. Don't reinvent the wheel, as I said also. Instead of that, reuse code, APIs, and services existing out there. But remember that it's not a plug and play. Even with reuse, a lot of things still need to be done. And finally, develop an AI strategy. Keep in mind that AI will be integrated in all software products. I mean, AI will not solve the problems by itself. Then, software engineers are essential to realize the strategy. And be sure that I'm saying that not because I am one of them. Thank you, Luis, for the event.
Thank you, Fabricio. Raphael, your closing remarks as well.
I just would like to thank everybody, all the panelists. Luis, it was a remarkable opportunity to chat with all of you. My advice would be baby steps, start small. You don't need AI if you don't need AI. Sometimes you need to put a JSON API in place. Don't use AI where it doesn't belong. And the cliche, fail often, fail fast, and don't stop the movement. Just keep it going. That would be my advice. I know a serious block to this is the risk aversion, but start small and keep going.
And finally, I reserve the final spot for Patricia, and as a thank you for helping organizing this webinar, as a thank you for sharing your expertise with us. Patricia, please share your final remarks with us.
Thanks, Luis. Well, I agree with all of them. Maybe a good advice could be that AI is just beginning, starting. In legislative house, you can't expect nothing different. We are learning every day, and sometimes I feel I am in a function that every day a new variable is inserted in the function. So be prepared for challenges, for surprises, and for a lot of work. And as Fabricio said, consider the clients, the leaders, and different profile of colleagues involved in the whole solution. And for other legislative house, I would like to say the Brazilian House of Representatives is open to discuss if they want to discuss alternatives, because even with our behavior being almost the same, there are a lot of similarities among us. Just talking with 2 or 3, you can find a lot of things that are absolutely similar in that legislative house. So we are open to discuss. It will be a pleasure.